this is going to be rose propagation using cuttings and grafting. So Elaine and I have been doing this for probably 6 or 7 years. Well, later on I'll show you how we got started. I'll go ahead and start it. Okay, so it'll be on starting your own root cuttings, starting Fortuniana or Pink Cloud, doing chip grafting and doing T-grafting. Okay, this is how we got started. So 2016, we went to a demonstration done by Coastal up in Oceanside, I believe. And Justin Ekwin was there. He was the speaker that talked to you guys last month. And actually, Berlin Leon was there, and she's the owner of Berlin Nursery. Anyway, so they gave a demo on rooting roses and grafting roses, and we got hooked. We have also gotten help from Kathy Strong, Bob and Kitty Belendez up in LA, and then Berlin. So all these people have, given us a lot of help in what we've been doing. Okay, so propagating from their own country, the advantages. It really doesn't take a lot of expertise. You just got to be a little dexterous. The labor, it's not, there's not a lot of labor, there's not a lot of materials, it's not expensive. They say that plants seem to live longer on their own roots. I'm not so sure, but that's what the literature says. And an advantage to doing it is, if you have access to a rare rose, why not try a cutting? If you can't even get it at any of the local nurseries or online nurseries, this is a perfect place, a perfect method to get one for yourself. Disadvantages, it says it may not be adapted to local soil condition. They do take a little longer to grow, but it depends on the rose itself. So an example is, earlier this year, Sue brought in some cuttings of pretty pink? Fresh pink. And she said, all you had to do is stick it in the ground. Well, I took a couple home and I just stuck them in a pot. I didn't do any of the usual stuff that I normally do, and you're going to see me demonstrate. And they both took, and they're growing fantastically. You never know which rose is going to do well. When we had our last open garden, there were a couple of people who were really fascinated by the lighter rose. It's a climber. I had gotten it probably, it was 8 inches tall when I got it. It's now probably 10 feet wide and 8 feet tall. And it's been 3 years. There's one in the auction if you want one. But I attempted to root 4 of them, they all took. And sometimes that's how it is. I think I got a rose called Magic Show from, I think it was Ken. He wanted me to root it. He gave me 6 stems, they all took. The other roses, like Black Magic, I have a heck of a time with Black Magic. I have probably tried to root 20 and got 2. So it's the rose. Some roses are so vigorous, and they can be very vigorous as a plant, but when you try to root them or graft them, they don't take. So there's no prediction on how they're gonna go. So the best time is in the spring and the fall. If you try it in the summer, you're gonna have some success, but because of the heat, there's more failures during the summer. It's just best, my best success was in the spring when I did my pruning. In January, I saved a bunch of cuttings and I attempted to root them, and I got more than I needed. So those are the roses I've been giving away for the last several years. However, sometimes you don't get the luxury of just being able to say, okay, I'm going to go find the best branch, the best rose. Sometimes the opportunity, you're visiting someone's garden, you see something you really want, and you just got to take it and attempt it at that time. So if it's in the middle of summer, go ahead and try it. Okay, so we're going to do something a little different this year, this time. I thought it would be advantageous for you to see the process of the different steps in grafting and rooting. So Jonathan Schwartz came over to my house and took videos of me doing these different steps. I thought that if I attempted to do it here, it would be hard to get all of you around at one table. So I figured doing it this way, it's going to be easier. It's really important for you to try to keep everything as clean as possible. You can never make everything sterile, but you can come close to trying to keep it as clean as possible. So all of the extra Clorox wipe that you still have after our COVID lockdown are perfect material to use to clean the knives and to clean your shears, your pruners. It's also important that your containers that you use, we wash them in soap and then put them in a 10% bleach before we add the soil to them. Of course, we let them air dry.
Question for you.
Sure.
What are we cleaning against? Just bacteria?
No, it's bacteria and fungi.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some viruses that are susceptible to bleach too, but it's mostly bacteria and fungi that attack the roses. Okay, so I'm going to show you this, but I'm also going to show you in a video form. So I'll probably go through this fairly fast, but you can see it again in the video. So you want to select a stem that has a rose that's already faded. So you don't want to pick a stem that hasn't bloomed yet or the bloom hasn't opened. It's always a bloom that has already opened or even has already formed a hip. But you want to make sure that where the leaves are, that the new buds haven't yet started to push out a lot. So if you already have 1/2, anything more than 1/4 of an inch growth, it's not going to be something that you want to graft. Now, it probably will be okay to try to root that, but you definitely don't want to graft it. So the reason that you might want to use a dog leg is right at that junction where the dog leg forms, and that's, where's my pointer? Oh yeah, right here. There's a lot of immature tissue right there which can form roots. And so if you can get a dog leg, it's definitely preferable. So in this example, you can see that I've removed the leaves from the lower portion, and then next I remove the bloom, and then I scrape the bottom part of the stem with a knife. So that's again to expose tissue that can form roots. All right, so here's another video. So first part of rooting a rose is to decide what you're going to root. And so I decided to root Colonel Phil Ash. And I've had problems over the years getting it to root, and so if I try in the past, I've tried 4 stems and sometimes I got none. Other times I've gotten 1. And so we're going to be using a new method of rooting. So hopefully I'll get more than my usual. The first part is picking your stems, and so you should always use a rose that has already bloomed, or one that even only has a hip. Now these have bloomed recently, and so they're finished. You want to cut off a bloom. You don't need any of these blooms. It's just to help you identify the rose. I'm sticking them back in the water. Okay, so one at a time, I'm going to evaluate each one. So if you look at these bud eyes, they're all pretty immature. They haven't yet started to grow out to form a new stem. And so that's what you want. You want young buds. Roots will sometimes form from the actual buds themselves, or they can grow from the bottom of the stem. You always want to make sure that they have a fresh cut, and the fresh cut is at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to do all of these first. You also want to be able, you always want to leave some leaves, but you want to take the leaves off of the bottom, and I always remove the thorns just because they're annoying. And again, I'm going to cut off so I have a fresh stem. Ideally, if you can find a stem that has a dog leg like this one, there is a lot of immature rose tissue at the dog leg. And if you can get one with a dog leg, it's sometimes it's best to use that. So again, I've taken off the top or the bottom 2 or 3 stems, and I've left several on the top. I'm going to prune some of those leaves off further. Again, removing all these thorns that are just in the way. Okay, so the next part is I decide how many leaves I'm going to leave, and I usually leave 3, but I don't leave all the leaves that are there. They don't fit well into the container if you have too many leaves, so I end up cutting off parts of each leaf. This one has too many on the top, so I'm only going to leave 3 sets of leaves. Okay, stop. Okay, all right. Any questions?
Is the dog leg option true for own root cuttings and grafted?
I'm sorry?
Is the dog leg option, is that true for own root cuttings and for grafting?
Not for grafting.
Okay.
Just for own root cutting. Yeah.
Does it matter if you choose a young rose plant compared to an older, mature rose plant for cutting to do this?
Yeah, it depends on. It's the stem, the rose stem. You need you can't have a rose stem that is real, that you can bend real easily. It doesn't have it'll just rot. So it needs to have formed the rose, and and maybe even started to form the hip. Because the stem itself will have hardened during that whole process. If you can take I grafted from a plant that I had just rooted, and it formed its first flower, and I then took that stem and rooted it. So yeah, you can do a new plant. You just don't want real fresh, supple tissue to try to root.
Did you cut right below the dog leg, or did you cut above the?
No, I cut below the dog leg.
Right below, okay.
Yeah.
One more, Bill.
Oh,
When you were defoliating the lower end,
yeah.
did I catch that you were actually flicking off the bud eyes that were?
No,
starting-
I was that was
Preserving those.
those were the thorns.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just what I use. So I use a starter mix that is mostly peat moss, and I get a large bale because I use the same peat moss when I start my dahlias. So it's just convenient that I can get it in a big bag. and then I mix it with cactus mix. At the very beginning of the learning how to root, we were told that the best media was perlite. So we tried that for a while, had some successes, but more failures than anything. We then added some core fiber, 10% to our perlite, and that helped a little bit. And then we just started experimenting with a lot of different things. I did 100% peat moss, I did 100% cactus, and one time when I mixed them 50-50, I got the most success so I've stopped. That's the way I do it now. So it's just 50-50. The seed starter mix, which is mostly peat moss, and cactus, which has some vermiculite, perlite, sand, compost, a lot of different things. Okay, so here's another video. This is the actual rooting process using Hormex. Oh, so this process is using a 8% Hormex powder, 50-50 with cinnamon. This is new. I only started doing this after Elaine, my wife, saw this in a video, and it gave there was a lot of praise for using the cinnamon. They said it was antibacterial and antifungal. So I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I started about a month ago, and so for me, this is a new method. So after a month, I can say that those ones that I rooted they haven't died off as quickly. So the next part is getting the rooting hormone and getting the stems ready to put into the potting soil. So this method is fairly new. This is something that Elaine discovered online. There was a lot of talk about using cinnamon because some of the properties of cinnamon have antifungal, they have antifungal properties. And rotting is one of the biggest problems that we have when trying to root any rose or actually anything. So what I'm using is just regular ground cinnamon, and I'm using an 8% Hormex rooting solution, mixing it 50-50. So I'm just preparing it, getting ready to dip my rose stems into it. Okay, so if you make a bulk amount of any of this hormone, you don't want to be dipping your rooting, you don't want to contaminate it. So I'm only using half of it. So I take the stem that I prepared earlier. I'm going to scrape the stem just to expose some of the rose tissue. I'm then going to dip that, roll it into the mixture. This is my soil mixture. I'm going to punch 4 holes because I have 4 stems. So with the first one, I punch a big hole because if you just dip it straight into the soil, it's going to scrape off the mixture that you just made. And so I put it down, and so here's the one that has the dog leg, and I just make a couple of scrapes on this one because there's so much active tissue, rose tissue, that I don't want to scrape any of that off. I'm going to make a bigger hole because there's a big section of that dog leg. Okay, so in this example, I decided to use my older method, which was to use Clonex, which is a rooting gel. It's purple, and so I've been using that for probably 2 years and having some success with it. So, well, the video will explain. But so I used the other two rose stems that I had previously prepared. So I forgot to talk about the mixture that we use to root the roses in. So I've been experimenting with many different combinations. I started out with straight perlite. It then went to perlite mixed with core fiber. And now I'm using a mixture of seed starter mix, which is mainly peat moss, and any cactus mix, which is usually sand, perlite, and compost. So if you mix those two together 50-50, you end up with something like this. And I'm also going to talk about the method of the cloning mixture that I've been using probably for the last several years. So the one I showed you previously, which is new, the cinnamon and the 8% Hormex, I've just recently started doing that, probably in the last couple of months. And I've had good success with it, so I'm going to show you both methods. So this is Clonex, and it's a gel. And again, you never want to dip your rooting, your rose roots or rose stems into the original jar. So I always pour out a little bit into a container. So I'm going to use the same method. I'm going to score, make 3 scrapes, and roll it in the Clonex rooting gel. I like this stuff because it sticks pretty good, and so I figure it's gonna stay there even when I stick it into the soil. And again, you know, I pre-punched a hole because I didn't want to scrape the Clonex off when I push it through the soil. Yeah, if you have a lot of excess, it's not a problem. Okay, so those 4 stems are now ready to go. So the next thing is you want to create an environment that is humid and moist. So what I've found is to cover this whole this container with a plastic bag. You can also use a 1-liter Coke bottle. You just cut off the bottom of the Coke bottle, and you can put it over the stems. Although the only problem is with a Coke bottle, you're kind of restricted into the number of samples that you can try to root at one time. But if you're only rooting 1 or 2, the Coke bottle is just fine. I've just gotten used to using these plastic bags that I cut a hole in the top, and that hole is so that some moisture can get out. I use these plastic stakes just to hold the plastic away from the stems. I just want to cover it and then slide it down, and then I put a rubber band around the base of it. So one thing I forgot to tell you was to, you of course have to tag what you're doing, and since I use 2 different methods, I'm going to tag them both with a little bit different identification. They're both kernel fill ash. They're both on their own root. They were both done on September 11th. One was done with Clonex, so I just put Clonex, and the other one was done with Hormex and cinnamon, so I just put H/C. So I'll just remember that these 2 over here were the Hormex, And these two over here were the clinics. Okay, so now that this is done, you want to place it outside in your garden, but it needs to be in the shade. You can't have it in direct light. Where I put these is under a shade cover that's in the yard. They do get the morning sun and sometimes the late afternoon sun, but it's only maybe 2 or 3 hours where they get direct light, but the light isn't real intense. Most of the day, they're covered by the shade cloth. Yes.
So the soil is moist and you don't have to water it again?
No. So what I do, I don't think I explained it. So what I do is I pre-moisten the soil. So it's totally saturated, and it's saturated with either the solution that well, no, I'm using something different actually. So when I first started doing rooting, it was, you know, with John Bagnasco up in Cal Coastal, and he swore by using a solution called HB101, and you use a very dilute amount. It's like 5 cc's, which is a very small volume, in a gallon of water. So what I do is I saturate the soil with HB101 until it runs out the bottom, and then when I cover it, I don't have to touch it for a whole month. You can just leave it in there. It's going to be wet enough. I think that a lot of my failures early on was that I was watering them constantly or misting them constantly. And so when I got away from doing that, all of a sudden my success rate went high. So, were there any other questions? Yeah.
Where do you live? How hot is it where you live?
I live in Clairemont of Mission Bay. It doesn't get as hot as inland, but it's not as cool as the coast.
And the second question is, are you putting 4 rootings in each pot?
Yeah, I can, but sometimes I only have 3, and I'll do 3 or 2. If you use the Coke bottle method, it's harder. So you can see that the space is limited because of the Coke bottle size. The containers will just hold more. So I think I've gotten 6 into one of the black 1-gallon containers. Yeah.
Does that bag have holes in it, or is it completely sealed?
No, it has a hole in the top.
Okay, I thought I saw you.
Yeah, I cut a hole in the top.
Are you getting roots from where you scored it or from the bottom of the cutting?
I score from the bottom of the cutting.
But are you getting roots forming from the
That's where they
score
form.
or the bottom?
They form, sometimes they form at the, right where you cut it with clippers. Sometimes they come right out of the scrape.
Okay.
It varies. Yeah.
When you spray this, were you using a special water combination of the straight water, or?
I'm sorry, repeat
When you
that?
were misting and water?
I don't mist. When I first started, I used to mist, but I don't
Just
now.
straight water, or did you?
Yeah, I just add water. Actually, I put I just put water in, you know, in the holes. I have a pitcher, a real small pitcher. I put the tip of the pitcher in the hole, and I don't have to take the plastic off. Yeah.
Does the plastic need to be clear plastic? Whatever you use, it needs to be.
Well, that's a good question. I've never used anything else than clear plastic, but I would think anything that would let the sun's rays in would probably be okay. Yeah.
Where do you buy your plastic bags?
Where did I get them? I got them at Smart and Final. It's like 1,000 of them. So that lasted me a long time.
They're 15-inch food service bags.
What's that?
They're 15-inch food service bags. I found them the other day.
15-inch food service packs. Yeah.
We're talking a lot about the mechanism, the procedure. What's the why of the bag? Is it just to maintain a very stable humidity
Yeah,
in the soil?
it's to maintain humidity, I believe. See, the successful rose growers that grow own root roses, they have these huge greenhouses that are constantly misted. So they have misters constantly spraying on the roses. And I think that's the humidity part that helps them to root. But it also helps them to rot. You get too much water and they're gonna rot. Yeah.
Yeah, so that Clonex gel, and then the other choice would be.
Okay, there's Hormex powder and Clonex gel.
Right,
Oh.
have you ever done both of those together, or?
No, I don't mix those two. They're both rooting hormones. They're just a different, one's a powder, the other one's a gel. Now, in the literature, it says that you can use 2%, 4%. I just use 8. It's the biggest number, and so I thought, well, I wanna have success. Okay, so these are examples of the filtered light that they get, and that's just day 0 over there. Okay, so here's examples of, here's a 2-week, after about 2 weeks, the leaves start to drop. So you think, oh, they're dying. No, the leaves just drop off. But they don't always. Sometimes you're lucky and the leaves stay the whole time. But the majority of the time, you end up after 3 or 4 weeks with just a naked stem. But so that's the next one is 4 weeks, and you can see where the arrow's pointing. You can see that there's the bud has started to grow. Now, when it gets to that point, you can fairly reliably say it's going to take, because they don't, after 4 weeks, and they're pushing out a bud, they generally don't die. Some do, but the vast majority of them make it. And then there's an 8-week cutting, and those are the new leaves. And I think that was the one that was Magic Show. I think there's 6 of them in there, and they all took. Okay, so that's what it looks. That's what the roots look like after 8 weeks, and then I spread them out so that you can see them. And at this point, when I get roots like this, then I put them into their own individual one gallon pot.
Bill,
Yeah.
how do you know when you should water?
When you should what?
Water.
You just feel. Just take the cover off and feel if it's moist. And you can also tell, I mean, I've been doing it long enough, I can pick up the pot. If it's light, I know it needs water. Okay, so this is just some of our successes with cuttings. Okay, so Fortuniana rootstock. All right, so the majority of roses that are grown in that are grafted, that you buy at your local nurseries are on a rootstock called Dr. Huey or Multiflora. Fortuniana is one that is, I think I talk about it on the next slide. It is difficult to root. So since I'm grafting, I like to graft roses, I need to have a rootstock to graft them onto, and since Fortuniana is the best, then I need to root my Fortuniana. The problem is it's more difficult than most rootstocks to root. If you wanted to root onto Dr. Huey, all you do is grab one of those suckers that that grow out of your roses, cut it into pieces, stick it in following this method, and most of them will root. Fortuniana is a little more difficult. It's not that easy to grow. But once you get it to root and then are successful with grafting, you're going to get a wonderful rose. To have a successful graft, you need warm nights, you need light, you need some light, you need good drainage, steady source of moisture, ventilation. It's going to take a while to get it going, and you can fertilize it only after it's sprouted. So where can you get it? Okay, UC Davis has a plant service where they will supply you with Fortuniana, but they will also supply you with, they must have 500 or 600 different roses that they will sell you, and they only cost 50 cents to $1 a stem. And if you were interested in growing a lot of one type of rose, you could get them from them. They'll send them to you. The shipping is what's expensive because they send them in a an insulated container. And so it's gonna cost you probably $50 for the shipping, but the material only costs, $10 or $20. They do say that they are free of rose mosaic virus. You can also get, lately K&M Nursery in Buckatuna has offered Fortuniana roots, rooted Fortuniana, and we ordered 20 about a month ago, and 17 are still alive. We only lost 3, and that's a pretty good success rate. So again, the advantages of this Fortuniana is that it really is good for our climate. Anywhere along the southern part of the United States, even out into the desert, it's the best rootstock to have. And it does, we have 2 bushes of a rose called Mango Blush, and the one that's on Fortuniana is probably 7 feet tall and probably 7 feet wide. The one that's on its rootstock is 6 feet tall and maybe 4 feet wide, and they're the same age. So this just was a slide on showing how to clean and sterilize, which you already saw that in the video. This is actually Fortuniana that I'm attempting to root. One thing that you didn't see in the video, if you're doing either Fortuniana or Dr. Huey, you have to remove every bud that is going to be below. So when you're rooting normally, you don't care about buds forming and putting out stems. But if you're growing Dr. Huey, multiflora, or Fortuniana, they're suckers. You don't want any suckers, so you have to remove all of the tissue that's attached to that leaf. Otherwise, you're going to get suckers growing from it. And so it does make it a little harder to grow because you are then wounding the plant in multiple places that you didn't necessarily want to wound the plant. And it's, that's bacteria and fungi in there. So it's one of the reasons I think that they're harder to root, because you have to get rid of all those, all that tissue. So this is just, I'm actually cutting away all the bud eyes on the bottom of the Fortuniana. And so that shows the HB 101. This is rather expensive though. That's over $100, so that's half a pint bottle. But it's going to last forever because, again, it's 5 cc's per gallon. It's going to last forever. I think you can get them smaller. I did get it on Amazon.
You can get it at Home Nursery.
Oh, okay, thank you. Is that Home Nursery?
Or City Nursery, I
City,
think it's called.
City Farmers?
Off of Home Avenue.
City Farmers?
City Farmers,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But the bottle's half that size.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just an explanation of what I had done in the past. Cleaning, the 50-50 mixture, the HB 101. I have here that I do sometimes soak them in that HB 101 overnight. I saturate them, and then I punch the holes. Yeah.
If you don't know what the rootstock is it just better to remove the buds?
Yes.
When in doubt, just remove
Yes.
them.
Yeah. Remove the buds if you don't know. If you don't know what it is, remove the buds. So again, this is just pictures of the grafting knife. I use this Falco grafting knife. I got it on Amazon. And this is just talking what you've seen on the video. And then the scraping and putting them in the pots. And you saw that on the video too. Yeah, and then when you first start, you're going to be there every day looking at them, and it gets to be old. I mean, you think, oh, it's only been a week, it's only been 2 weeks, it's only been 3 weeks. Yeah, it takes a long time when you look at them every day. The best thing to do is to do it and not look at them for at least a week, because nothing's going to happen in a week. They're not going to die. They're not going to grow. So first week, just let them go. Okay, so here's what a failure looks like. So what has happened is this one has started to form, it's calloused over, it's started to form a root, and then you can see that black just traveled up, and the growth that had started at the top just wilted. So that's a failure, and you usually will see that probably after a month. It's about a month before you see that. And the next one over is every one of them have died. They're all brown. It's interestingly, sometimes you pull those up and everything below the ground is green. And sometimes they even have roots. But everything above it is dead, and there's no way that you can salvage that. I've tried so many different ways, thinking, oh, if I just cut it off here, cut it off there, maybe it'll come back. No, they never come back. Once they look like that, that's it. All right, so that's some of our successes with grafted roses on Fortuniana. And then pictures. Okay, so this is the first method we learned was chip grafting. So I'm gonna show it two ways. I'm gonna show you just pictures, and then it'll be a video. Okay, so what the process is you take the bud eye from the rows that you're gonna propagate, and then you cut a similar size chip in the rootstock that you've rooted. And that's the hard part, to get the sizes the same. And then you place the bud eye into the chip and then secure it with tape. But you'll see all this. Okay, so there's me cutting out a chip and putting it in water. When I first saw the video on someone doing it, they just stuck the chip in their mouth. And supposedly saliva has good antibacterial, so, I mean, this person had been doing it for years, so it must have been a good way to do it. But I just put it in a little dish of water. All right, so that's the Fortuniana that I've now cut a chip into. So what I do is I do slice it, but I don't cut the whole thing off. I leave a flap. So I sliced up, I cut off some of it, left a flap, and about the third slide, I've inserted my chip, and that flap helps hold the chip that you just took. So the idea is that the tissue that's around the chip that you took and the chip that you took out, they're gonna be close to each other, and the tendency is for plants is to grow together. And so the tissues are gonna try to grow together, and so if they grow together, you're successful. I then wrap it with it's a parafilm base, and it stretches type of tape. Again, you can get it on Amazon. You just want to completely cover that whole area that you've cut. Okay, so here's the process. All right, so I'm going to do, this is chip budding, and since I do not have any Fortuniana at the moment that is rooted and ready to go, I'm using Pink Cloud. It's another rootstock that is actually made, but not made. It's people use it for any miniatures or mini floral roses. And since this is a miniature, anyway. So I did cut up a section up, and I'm then gonna right about there cut it off so that you have an exposed. And then I grab one of my buds, making sure I'm pointing in the right direction. You always want to make sure the bud is pointing up. And you slide it up and try to position it. So you want to take the chip out of the stem to be about the same size as the chip you took out of the budwood that you have, and then you try to position it so that it's going to cover it. And this is grafting tape, and like everything else that I have to buy here, I get it on Amazon. So it's a paraffin film that stretches, and so I'm just going to wrap it around several times to anchor it. And now I'm going to start wrapping around the chip that I took out. Again, I want to make sure that the chip is positioned over the section that I just cut out. You want it to be fairly even, because what you hope happens is that the chip and the pink cloud, they both try to grow into each other. So that tissue chip that I cut out is still alive and viable, and it's going to try to attach itself to this rose, and that's why I'm pulling fairly tightly and wrapping it repeatedly so that it's as airtight as I can get it. Give it a final press, and that's it. Okay, T-grafting. Some people say it's easier to do T-grafting. You know, I think they both have their advantages.
So, Bill,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, so you've done the paraffin thing, and it looked like the stem had branching coming off.
Yes.
So you wrap it, and then what happens? How do you get that fresh new variety? I don't understand are you gonna show us next?
Well, I'm going to show you.
Oh, this is.
Well, this isn't it, but it'll later on. You'll see the process. Grafting, a month, 2 months, 3 months, that sort of thing. Yes, it had a lot of that. All that growth was pink cloud. So that's a rose pink, and so you want to have growth on whatever you're grafting onto, because you know it's going to help take care of the wound that you've just put in the plant. So if you have active growth, you have roots, you have leaves, you're going to get a lot of growth, and hopefully it's going to stimulate that bud that you just attached to start to grow. But I'll show you. Okay, so T-grafting, it's the same. You start a similar way. You cut out the chip that you want. The difference is you make a T cut in the stem itself, and you peel it back. You'll see it in the video, but okay. So I've made the T cut. I've made horizontal and vertical cuts, and this was pictures that I probably from 3 years ago, and at that time I was just using a scalpel, and you can get those on Amazon too. So anyways, peeling back both sides, you want to be careful that when you peel back, you don't tear it. So it's a gentle peel back of that tea that you just made. And now I'm sliding in that the chip that I took out.
Bill, when you slide it in, you're doing bare hands. You disinfect your fingers too?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm cleaning my fingers with those wipes all the time. So anyway, so yeah, you slide it down and then you wrap it. You'll see it a little bit better on the video, I think. Okay, so now this is an example of T-grafting. So I'm going to start a little different in that I'm going to cut off most of the leaflet, but I'm going to keep a little bit of the end of the leaf, and you'll see why here in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to cut the bud out similarly to when I do a chip. And again, it doesn't make any difference if you start in the bottom or the top. Okay, and I want to put it in the liquid just to keep it wet. So I'm going to start by making the top of the T cut by just pressing in and cutting into the cambium layer of the budwood, and then making a slit, making the T part, bottom part of the T-graft, going up and matching the horizontal one. And then peel back the cambium layer. Try not to tear it in any way. So cut on both sides and then peel back on both sides. All right, so now you can see why I left it with a handle, because I'm going to try to slide this into this. It's not always easy to do. But sometimes it works like a charm, other times it doesn't. You want to be able to slide the budwood from the rose that you took the budwood from and slide it into the slit that you made into the rootstock. And so I think I got it. All right, so I start at the top, I anchor it, and then I slowly slide down. And you're going to leave that part of the leaf just kind of hanging out by itself. But you want to make sure that you're covering all the part of the stem that you damaged when you cut. Okay. So it's different from the just the previous slide. That was taken like 3 years ago when I first started doing T-grafting. I learned then keeping that extra leaf, part of the leaf, it's just handier. It's easier to slide it down that T, so that's why I'm using it. Just an aside here, that says JB Fort. It's I got that fort from John and Barbara Lester. So I always keep track of what fort. So I get it from sometimes I get it from Gary Bullman. Sometimes I get it from Justin Ekwon. And then sometimes I have some fort of my own. So it'll be J fort, it'll be G fort, it'll be O fort, just different fort.
Meaning Fortuniana.
Fortuniana. Yeah.
For a beginner, what do you find better, the T-grafting or the I-bud?
I think the chip is easier. Slicing that and not tearing it when you pull it back, that takes a little extra. You gotta be real careful when you peel it back. Yeah. Any other questions?
I was just gonna ask, were you a surgeon in your past life?
No. Well, I was a medic in the Army.
Okay.
And so I'm familiar with scalpels.
Okay. So you seem very skilled.
Yeah, and then you wait. And you wait and you wait. I think I've had more failures. Yeah, I've had more failures grafting than rooting. Rooting seems to be a lot easier. Grafting, first of all, you have to get the Fortuniana, which is hard to root. And then once you get a rooted plant, it's got to grow. And so it has to be a plant that's got good roots, it's got good growth, and then you graft it. And not all the grafts take. So you could waste a whole plant just on a single graft. So what I've learned is I graft high up the stem, And if it fails, I go down maybe one more time, and I'll try a spot lower down, because I know in the end I'm going to cut off the whole top of the Fortuniana anyway. All I want is roots, and I think I have. So this is a success. So you can see in the first picture on the left, the bud has started to form. The next one over, it has got leaves, and on the first one on the right, it still has the Fortuniana growing. Once it gets to be about 4 to 6 inches, you just cut off the top of the plant. You don't need it anymore. All you want is the root. You don't want any of the plant. And so that plant is about to flower.
And it looks like you took the tape off?
Yeah, and then you can take the tape off.
At which point?
Oh, when? Well, once it has, you know, it's taken. You know, I think one back there, I probably still have the tape on it. I sometimes forget to take the tape off. It's not going to hurt the plant any. Leave it on.
So that bud pops through the tape?
Yeah, it just pops through. It'll push through.
Okay.
Just push right through the tape. And I've had them do some grafts. I've had one that took like 4 months. You know it hasn't failed because it's still green. And so once you see it turn brown, then you know it's failed. But I've had grafts that take 4 months. I had what was it? I did one. It was, I don't remember the name of it. Oh, the Iron Throne. Yeah. It popped out in a week. So, you know, it depends on the plant. You never know. Okay, so this is just a video showing some of the rooted grafted plants. This is what a graft looks like this is a Fortuniana graft of iconic mango lemonade. And it is 11 months old. It has bloomed several times. This one is another, it's on Fortuniana. It is a graft of Secret, which is a nice hybrid tea, fragrant. And it is 10 months old. This one, which has bloomed numerous times, is a graft of Fair Hope, and it is on Pink Cloud. And it is probably 2 years old. So the first one, Iconic Mango Lemonade, is going to be at the Cal Coastal Auction in 2 weeks. The Secret is the one that's back there, and Fair Hope, I think I kept that one. All right, so these are just examples of 2 roses in our garden. So that's Black Magic. I should have never grafted on Fortuniana. It is a monster. It grows 8 to 9 feet tall. That one's after I pruned it. Then Ring of Fire. We asked Chris Greenwood if we could, we got permission from him to graft it. Elaine grafted that one, and it's 7 feet tall. And you know, these plants are 3 years old, maybe. Okay, the ethics. So if a rose is patented, you're not supposed, I mean, it's illegal to do it. There aren't any patent police out there looking for you, but you know, you just got to think about it. If I can get this rose, why go through all the hassle of what I'm doing? I can just buy it, you know, for $20, $24, whatever they cost these days. So anyway, you're not supposed to propagate until the patent expires. So we try to respect the hybridizer. And most of them are commercially available anyway. Those that aren't patented, you know, they're, I guess, mostly free game. You can do whatever you want. And as Bob Martin already said, a good rule might be that if you can order the rose at a nursery or a major supplier, you should just do so. So it's really the roses that are rare, unusual. You know, I got a request from someone. He wasn't even a member of the society, and he somehow got my name, but he asked if I could graft. He wanted he didn't want to graft. He just wanted a rose that he was selling the house that his mother lived in. He grew up there, and he wanted the rose. I don't think it's commercially available. It might be commercially available, but it's not a real popular rose. It's called Talisman. And so he gave me four stems. I tried to explain to him beforehand what I needed, and unfortunately he didn't follow my directions, and he gave me, you know, stems that still had, the bud hadn't even formed yet. And anyway, so he gave me 6, I got one to go, and so he's very happy because he's now gonna take this rose and put it in his garden because he sold the house and his mother had passed. So I mean, that's why you wanna propagate an old rose, one that has memory. We have a rose in our garden, Gemini. I mean, it's a common rose, but it was special because I had a nephew who passed away early. He was in his 30s when he passed away. And his mother, my sister, had him cremated, and she spread some of his ashes on my rose Gemini. Well, she moved to New Mexico. She would always come in, whenever she came to our garden, she would always visit the rose because it was Gemini, because her son was a Gemini, you know, astrologically. And it was right there at the beginning when we started rooting roses, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And so I tried 2, and they both took. I thought, wow, this is great. This is easy. I can do this anytime. Well, you know, I failed many more times after that, but I did get the 2 Geminis to grow, and I gave one to each of my sisters. So it was meaningful to them. Okay, good luck. Any questions?
Have you found in your trials and your experiments certain grafting brings unique vulnerability to the plant that another plant did not have?
Oh. No. There have been times when I've grafted successfully, the rose has grown and it's bloomed, and then the graft dies. And so I lose the whole plant. But that's the exception. Most of the time they take easily.
No special infestations or common, nothing in that category?
I'm sorry?
The infestations?
No, I don't see any difference in, you know, it being attacked by any funguses or, I mean, it's the same. I mean, Mr. Lincoln's gonna get mildew no matter where you're at or what it's on. It's just a plant that always gets mildew. Yeah.
Where did you get your Fortuniana stems that you planted?
Well, I used to get them from UC Davis. I started there, but then Gary Bowman's got a plant, so I just go to his house.
I was gonna say, because those are pretty older, thicker.
What's that?
The ones you get from the university are very small, aren't they?
Well, they're about 10 inches.
Yeah, but those stems you had were a lot bigger.
Yeah, well, yeah, when I get them from Gary, I can cut them as long as I want because he's got a plant that's a huge plant, and I take a whole stem and then I decide how big I want to cut them. Justin, you know, the guy that talked last month, he gets the very long stems and makes trees out of them. So he makes tree roses out of his very long stems. I've never even attempted. Those things are too, you know, I have trouble with the short ones. I'm not going to try a 4-footer. Thank you.